August 10, 1978. A Ford Pinto erupts in flames on an Indiana highway. 3 teenage girls burn to death inside. Their names, Judy, Lynn, and Donna Ulrich. What makes this tragedy different from any car accident in American history? Ford Motor Company knew this would happen. They calculated the cost. And they decided your life wasn't worth $11. Welcome to the Hidden Car Files. What you're about to discover will change how you see corporate America forever. This is the story of the death calculation. 1968, Ford's executive boardroom in Dearborn, Michigan. Lee Iacocca, the company's rising star, presents an ambitious vision to Henry Ford II. The revolutionary small car. Under 2,000 pounds, under $2,000. The mission: compete with Volkswagen Beetle and the incoming Japanese invasion. The deadline: an unprecedented 25 months from conception to production. The industry standard was 43 months. Ford would cut development time in half. Engineers warned this was dangerous. Corners would have to be cut. Safety testing would be rushed. But Iacocca had numbers on his side. Import cars were capturing 20% of the American market. Ford was bleeding money. The Pinto wasn't just a car. It was Ford's financial lifeline. Production was approved. 1970. The Pinto hit showrooms. Initially, it's a massive success. Over 400,000 units sold in the first year. Critics praise its economy and style. But behind the scenes, Ford's crash test engineers are discovering something terrifying. In rear impact collisions above 25 miles per hour, the fuel tank ruptures. Gas spills into the passenger compartment. The slightest spark creates an inferno. The problem? The fuel tank's location. Positioned between the rear axle and the bumper, just 9 inches from the back of the car. No reinforcement, no protective barrier. Engineers tested 11 different Pintos, 11 rear-end collisions, 11 fuel tank failures. 100% failure rate. The data was conclusive. The Pinto was a death trap. But here's what they didn't tell the public. Ford engineers had a solution. A simple rubber bladder inside the fuel tank. Cost $11 per vehicle. With projected sales of 11 million Pintos, that's a total fixed cost of $121 million. So Ford's executives commissioned a cost-benefit analysis. This is where corporate decision-making enters the realm of the unthinkable. What happened next would become the most infamous calculation in business history. The document was internal. It was never meant to see daylight. But during litigation, it surfaced. The title, Fatalities Associated with Crash-Induced Fuel Leakage and Fires. Inside a cold mathematical equation, benefits versus costs, lives versus dollars. Ford estimated 180 deaths, 180 serious burn injuries, and 2,100 burned vehicles per year. Using values provided by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they assigned monetary values to human suffering. Deaths $200,000 each, injuries $67,000 each. Burned vehicles $700 each. Total social cost of not fixing the problem, $49.5 million. Total cost of installing the safety modification, $137 million. The conclusion was mathematically simple. It was cheaper to let people die. Ford's executives made their decision. No recall, no modification, no warning to consumers. Production continued. Between 1971 and 1978, over 3 million Pintos rolled off the assembly line. Each one carried the same fatal design flaw, each one a potential funeral pyre. The reports started coming in. 1972. A woman in California dies when her Pinto is rear-ended at 35 miles per hour. The car explodes. Witnesses describe a fireball. 1973. A mother and her 4 children burned to death in Orange County. Rear-end collision. Fuel tank rupture. The youngest victim was 18 months old, died in her mother's arms. 1974. A 13-year-old boy becomes a human torch after a minor fender bender. He survives, but with burns covering 90% of his body. Decades of surgeries follow. Ford's legal team settles case after case, quietly, out of court, non-disclosure agreements. The pattern becomes clear. They're managing a liability, not fixing a problem. But the numbers Ford calculated, they were catastrophically underestimated. Independent researchers later determined the actual death toll was between 500 and 900 people. Thousands more suffered catastrophic burns and permanent disfigurement. The financial settlements eventually exceeded $2 billion in today's money. Far more than the cost of the original $11 fix, but the human cost. Incalculable. Families destroyed. Lives ended in unimaginable agony, children orphaned. This is where it gets truly terrifying. Ford wasn't violating any laws. In the 1970s, no federal regulation required manufacturers to protect fuel tanks in rear-end collisions. The Pinto met every existing safety standard when it launched. Cost-benefit analysis was standard corporate practice. Insurance companies used it. Government agencies used it. Ford was simply applying accepted business methodology. The difference? They put it in writing. They created evidence of their cold calculation. Other companies made similar decisions, but never documented them so explicitly. August 1978. The Ulrich sisters' deaths finally trigger what internal data couldn't. Public outrage. The state of Indiana takes an unprecedented step. They charge Ford Motor Company with reckless homicide. 3 counts. This is the first time in American history a corporation faces criminal charges for a product defect. The trial becomes national news. Journalists expose the memo, the death calculation, the $11 part. Headlines scream. Mother Jones magazine publishes a devastating expose titled Pinto Madness. Congressional hearings are called. Lee Iacocca testifies. He defends the cost-benefit analysis as rational. Ford's legal team mounts an aggressive defense. They argue the Ulrich crash wasn't typical. They claim the van that hit the Pinto was traveling at 50 miles per hour, not 30. They present expert witnesses who testify that no small car could survive such an impact. They argue that Ford engineers were working within industry norms, that safety is always a compromise with cost, that perfect safety is impossible. The strategy works. March 1980. The jury deliberates for 4 days. Their verdict, not guilty. Ford is acquitted on all criminal charges. The company's stock price rises. Executives celebrate. But the court of public opinion delivers a different judgment. Ford's reputation is destroyed. The Pinto becomes synonymous with corporate greed and callous disregard for human life. Sales collapse. By 1980, dealers can't give Pintos away. September 1978. Ford finally announces a recall, all 1.5 million Pintos, still on the road. The fix? A plastic shield behind the fuel tank and a longer filler pipe. Total cost per vehicle, $11, exactly what engineers recommended 8 years earlier. The recall is the largest in automotive history at the time. It costs Ford millions, indirect expenses and billions in lost sales and brand damage. The irony is devastating. If Ford had installed the fix from the beginning, total cost would have been $137 million. Instead, they paid over $2 billion in settlements, recall costs, and lost market value. The death calculation failed even on its own ruthless terms, but the impact goes far beyond Ford's balance sheet. The Pinto scandal triggers a revolution in product liability law. Courts begin awarding punitive damages in defect cases. The message is clear. Companies can't simply calculate that deaths are cheaper than fixes. Congress passes new regulations. Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 301 is strengthened. Fuel systems must now withstand 30-mile-per-hour rear impacts without leakage. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration gains new enforcement powers. Manufacturers must report defects immediately. Criminal penalties are introduced for concealment. The automotive industry's entire approach to safety transforms. Cost-benefit analyses continue, but they're never again documented so explicitly. Legal departments take control. The lesson isn't that companies stopped calculating. They learned to hide the calculations. Business schools study the Pinto case for decades. It becomes the definitive example of corporate ethics failure. Students debate whether Ford's decision was rational or criminal. Some professors argue the calculation was sound, but the execution was flawed. They claim Ford should have been transparent about the risk-benefit trade-off. Let consumers decide. Others contend that human life cannot be reduced to a dollar value, that certain decisions transcend mere economics, that corporations have moral obligations beyond profit. The debate continues, but what's undeniable is the human cost of prioritizing speed and profit over safety. Let's talk about the individuals behind the statistics. Richard Grimshaw, 13 years old, passenger in a Pinto that was rear-ended in 1972. The car exploded. His neighbor, the driver, died instantly. Richard suffered full thickness, burns over 90% of his body. He endured over 50 surgeries, lost his nose, his ears, most of his fingers, spent years in excruciating pain and rehabilitation. His lawsuit against Ford resulted in a $125 million jury award, reduced on appeal to $3.5 million. The money couldn't restore his childhood, couldn't give him back his face, couldn't erase the trauma. He was a number in Ford's calculation, one of 180 projected burn victims, worth $67,000. Matthew, Mark, and Judy Ann Ulrich, the three sisters who died in Indiana. Judy was 18, Lynn was 16, Donna was 18. They were driving to a church volleyball practice. Their Pinto stalled on the highway. Before they could move it, a van struck them from behind. The fuel tank ruptured. Gas poured into the cabin. The car became an inferno in seconds. Witnesses tried to help but couldn't approach the flames. The girls' screams were heard. For nearly a minute before they fell silent, their mother received the news at home. 3 daughters dead in one moment, all because of a design decision made years earlier. In a corporate boardroom, 3 lives Ford valued at $200,000 each. Mrs. Gray, a California schoolteacher, rear-ended while waiting at a stoplight in 1972. Impact speed 28 miles per hour. Her Pinto exploded. She suffered fatal burns. Before she died, she was conscious long enough to understand what was happening to her. The driver who hit her was uninjured. He watched helplessly as she burned to death. He testified at trial that he would have nightmares for the rest of his life. Survivor's guilt. These weren't statistics, they were people. Children, parents, neighbors, each one. A universe of relationships and potential. Each death rippled through families and communities. Each one could have been prevented for the cost of a movie ticket, $11. The question haunts us. How did executives make this decision? How did they sleep at night, knowing they were trading lives for profit margins? Psychology offers some explanations. Moral distancing. When decisions are made in abstract terms using numbers and projections, the human cost becomes invisible. Projected fatalities are easier to accept than actual. Screaming victims. Diffused responsibility. In a large corporation, no single person makes the final call. Engineers recommend. Accountants calculate. Executives approve. Lawyers review. Everyone can claim they were just doing their job. Groupthink. When an entire organization operates within a culture of profit maximization, dissenting voices are silenced. Anyone who raises ethical concerns is seen as naive or disloyal. The system selects for compliance, time pressure. Lee Iacocca's aggressive timeline meant decisions were made quickly without full consideration of implications. Rush to market overrode caution. Competitive pressure. Ford was losing market share to imports. Executives genuinely believed the company's survival was at stake. In their minds, they were saving thousands of jobs. These explanations don't excuse the decisions. They illuminate how ordinary people in corporate structures can make monstrous choices. The banality of evil in business form. What's most disturbing? This still happens today. Different companies, different products, same underlying logic. Pharmaceutical companies calculate acceptable death rates for drugs. Chemical manufacturers weigh cancer clusters against cleanup costs. Tech companies balance user safety against engagement metrics. The calculations are more sophisticated now, hidden in actuarial tables and risk assessments, laundered through consulting firms and legal review. But the fundamental question remains: when is it acceptable to let people die for profit? The legal answer is nuanced. Courts recognize that absolute safety is impossible, that every product involves risk-benefit trade-offs, that consumers implicitly accept some danger when they buy a car or take a medication. But there are limits when companies know about a defect and conceal it. That crosses the line. When a cheap fix exists and isn't implemented purely for profit, that's reckless. When the danger vastly exceeds consumer expectations, that's negligence. The Pinto met all 3 criteria. Ford knew had a cheap fix, concealed the danger. The moral answer is clearer. You don't get to kill people because it's cheaper than saving them. Full stop. Some decisions cannot be reduced to spreadsheets. Lee Iacocca later became CEO of Chrysler and an American business icon. He wrote best-selling books, became a symbol of industrial revival. In interviews, he rarely discussed the Pinto. When pressed, he defended the decision as legally and economically sound. He never apologized. He never acknowledged the human cost. He died in 2019 at 94. Worth hundreds of millions, his legacy remains complicated. Brilliant executive or callous profiteer, perhaps both. The engineers who raised concerns early were vindicated but not celebrated. Many left Ford. Some spoke publicly about the toxic culture. Most remained silent, bound by non-disclosure agreements and fear of industry blacklisting. Their careers suffered. The victims and their families received settlements, but no true justice. No criminal convictions. No executives jailed, just money which can never replace a child or repair a destroyed body. Many families became advocates for automotive safety reform. Ford Motor Company survived the scandal. Today it remains one of America's largest automakers. The Pinto is remembered as a dark chapter, but didn't destroy the corporation. Some would say that's the real tragedy, that you can make these decisions and survive. So what are the lessons? For corporations, reputation matters more than short-term profit. Ethical failures have long-term financial consequences. Transparency is better than concealment. For engineers, speaking up matters. Documentation matters. When you see danger, you have a moral obligation to sound the alarm, even at personal cost. For regulators, industry won't regulate itself. Strong safety standards save lives. Enforcement must have teeth. For consumers, demand accountability. Support stronger safety regulations. Remember that behind every product recall are real victims. For all of us, remain vigilant. The forces that led to the Pinto scandal haven't disappeared. Profit pressure, competitive dynamics, short-term thinking. These remain constant in corporate America. New technologies bring new risks. Autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, biotechnology. Each presents opportunities for companies to make Pinto-style calculations. Will they choose differently? History suggests not unless we demand it. The Pinto scandal revealed a fundamental truth about modern capitalism. In the absence of strong regulation and public accountability, corporations will optimize for profit over people. Not because executives are evil, but because the system incentivizes it. The solution isn't to eliminate profit motive, it's to align incentives with values. Make safety profitable through strict liability. Make transparency mandatory through disclosure laws. Make negligence costly through punitive damages. 45 years after the Ulrich sisters burned to death on that Indiana highway, cars are safer than ever. Fuel systems are reinforced. Crash standards are stringent. Death rates have plummeted. But we paid for that progress with hundreds of lives. Lives that could have been saved for $11 each. That's the true cost of the death calculation. Not the settlements, not the recalls, but the people. The children who never grew up. The parents who died protecting them. The survivors who carry scars that never fade. This is the hidden car files. We reveal the stories the industry once buried. The decisions made behind closed doors, the calculations that value profits over people. Because the only way to prevent the next Pinto is to remember the last one. If this investigation opened your eyes, there are dozens more untold stories. Scandals still hidden. Decisions still being made. Subscribe to Make sure you never miss an investigation. And remember, question everything, trust no one. Demand accountability. The truth is out there.